I've come today to the city of Bradford in the county of Yorkshire, and I've come to the Undercliffe Cemetery. I've not been here before, but the first thing I notice is there's quite a good range of sizes of monuments. Some quite tall ones over there, some sizable ones here. And of course Bradford was a very wealthy town in textiles if we go back 100 years. Just inside the main gate is the war grave to Sergeant A. Gill, who was a pilot in the Royal Air Force, and he died in 1944, aged just 21. This one here stands out because it's a very large monument, and the name is Thomas Beaumont, a surgeon, and further down it says one of the founders of the Temperance Society. A couple of markers here, presumably the people weren't buried here or aren't buried here yet. This just says J. Clayton, owner, and behind it is another one which says J. Galloway, owner. This is another war grave here, but it's interesting to see it's done in a different sort of stone than you usually find. It's a sort of marble finish, and it's to Second Lieutenant J.G. Hewitt, West Yorkshire Regiment, who died in 1918. There is no age on there. This one tells us a little bit about the person. This is Joseph Wilcox, for upwards of 40 years a faithful clerk in the office of Messrs Taylor, Jeffrey and Little, solicitors, and they erected this memorial to him. There's obviously been a big effort here by the trustees of the cemetery to clear this area. The bit between the curbstones, they put a membrane down to stop weeds coming through, and then put pebbles on top, and no doubt the grass will grow in the areas between. And a jolly good job they've done this. Excellent effort by volunteers. There's one here to Jonathan Eastwood, a machinist of Bradford, and then we have his wife and his youngest daughter. There's one here whose name I remember, Bob Cryer, the MP, socialist, parliamentarian, iconoclast and lifelong rebel. At the end of the main path is this enormous monument here, and the main name on it seems to be Joseph Smith Gent. Nothing else, Joseph Smith Gent, and there are a few other names on each side. This is Sir Thomas Aitchison, Colonel Royal Lancashire Militia Artillery and late Captain of the Royal Artillery. He died in 1877. The one on the left here is very elaborately carved, and the script on the stone is very old-fashioned, and it's to Frederick Johnson, a timber merchant of Bradford. And a very nicely carved stone. On this one we've got a distraught angel hanging from the cross in despair, and the name at the bottom is Henry Stowell Binks. Now this is a little unusual. It's got a cross, but it's not a traditional cross with horizontal arms. They're at a diagonal angle. This one here is to Charles Rice, comedian, for many years lessee and manager of the Theatre Royal in Bradford. He died in 1880. Next door to him we have Sergeant Henry Beanland, RAF, beloved son, and he was killed in operations in West Africa in 1944, aged just 22, and he was interred in Fajara Military Cemetery, Bathurst. Nice piece of carving on here, with the hand coming out of the sleeve, holding the wreath, and the inscription is to Samuel Lister, Now here's something a little different. We have this lady lying in her bed, and cradled in her arms is a young child. Above her head is the Crucifixion, and the stone itself seems to be the Barlow family. A number of names there. This one here again has the figure of the lady, presumably in mourning, but nicely carved. Underneath it says the words Faith, and then Ellen, the wife of James Wright. A very tall monument here, William Mawson, architect of Bradford, but interestingly above here we have his likeness. Another very tall one here, and the interesting name on here is John Attlee Gibson, late proprietor of the Bradford Laundry. Richard Rowe, rag and paper merchant in Bradford. There are areas of this graveyard that are quite impossible to reach. They're completely overgrown, but in other places it's quite clear that big efforts have been made to clear away a lot of the brambles and undergrowth. You can see here an area where they've cut all the undergrowth back, and behind it still work to do. An elaborate memorial here in a stone that has gone very black, very intricately carved, and the name on it is Anne Dixon, the wife of Bernard Dixon. A large tomb here to Sir Henry Mitchell, a merchant of Bradford. He owned one of the large mills in the town. Just down off the main path is an area lower than the main path, and it has a lot of large and imposing memorials in it. We'll get down there in due course. Back on the centre path, there are so many imposing and interesting memorials here to look at. This was certainly a wealthy town. Grand one here to Henry Brown of Daisy Mill, Rawdon, born in Bradford. Another massive memorial here to Robert Milligan of Acacia, Rawdon, born in Scotland, became a resident of Bradford and was the first mayor of Bradford in 1847. There's one here to John Burton. He was the organist and 6 years conductor of the Bradford Festival Choral Society. Here's the first one of these I've seen, James Wignall, butter factor of Bradford. Joseph Brown was a wool stapler of Bradford, and the wool trade was of course one of the major businesses here. Another very tall one. And this is a memorial to Emma, the beloved wife of William Sharp, a fishmonger of Bradford. Clearly a lot of money in fishmongering. One here, I hope you can read it, Fred Greenwood Smith, who lost his life in the tramway accident at 4 Lane Ends in 1888. He was just 29. Apparently an engine was pulling a carriage up a slope on the tramway, and the carriage became detached from the engine and rolled down the hill at ever increasing speeds until it came off the rails and fell over. Just one death and a number injured, and this is the chap who died, Fred Greenwood Smith. They've cleared the undergrowth away to reach this one, and this is William Jackson, composer of the Deliverance of Israel from Babylon, Isaiah and other musical works. and this was raised by the Bradford Festival Choral Society. The friends of the cemetery have placed a few of these barcodes on some of the graves, so you can look at the history of some of the people here, and this one actually refers to William Jackson. A very grand one here to the family of Behrens, and we can see two of the names in the centre here: Doris, the wife of Sir Jacob Behrens, and then Sir Jacob Behrens. A big chunk of stone here to John Steele, a surgeon who was born at Edinburgh and died in Bradford 1863. Quite a nice set of words on the bottom here. Erected by his fellow townsmen in affectionate remembrance of one alike loved as a friend and esteemed in his profession, skillful, kind and self-sacrificing in the performance of his duty, his removal after 30 years' valuable service was felt and mourned by all classes of the community, and a public loss. It doesn't get much better than that. We'll just head now down to this lower level. I trust there's not too much wind noise because we're on top of a hill here and it's blowing a half gale. Very elaborate one here. And one of the inscriptions is Swithin Anderton, JP of Bradford. And again, if you want to know more about this particular monument, there is the barcode. There are some really grand memorials here. Proving difficult in selecting the memorials that I can actually show on this short video. There are just so many here. There's a very large one here to Illingworth, and in particular Alfred Illingworth, and they owned one of the largest spinning mills in Bradford. Well-known name in the textile business, Illingworth. One here who seems to be far from home, Robert Pritchard Labatt of Prescott in Canada, and his wife Agnes Russell Labatt. One here to John Wilman, a brush manufacturer of Bradford, and clearly that was quite a wealthy trade. And there's a good sized memorial here to Sam Oddie, a decorator, Market Street, Bradford, and a number of other Oddies on the stone. One here with a very solid cross from a very large block of stone, and we have this sad looking lady, young girl, and the monument down the bottom here is to a Lady Mayoress of Bradford and Sir Anthony Gaddy, Lord Mayor and Freeman of the city. Again, this grave has one of these barcodes on it, so if you want to know more, it's very straightforward. 3 stones here. John Robertson, who was Vicar of Bradford. Alongside him is Henry Byron Reid, who was the MP for East Bradford. And beneath it says it was erected by nearly 3,000 of his constituents and friends in recognition. And then the third one we've got another Vicar of Bradford, Archdeacon of Craven and Canon of Ripon. Down beneath that lowered section is another section lower still. This has more modern memorials on it, and clearly those in the front row here are for children, with the teddy bears and so on the memorials, children's toys. There are some very poignant memorials here to children who died, and a number have the picture of the child involved. Very moving. One here to John Whittaker, a carriage proprietor, and above there is the image of a horse. so we know what sort of carriages we're talking about here. Very sad family story here. These are the 4 brothers, the 4 children of Robert Smith, the station master of the Midland Railway Bradford, and Harriet, his wife, who all died within 1 week. 1880, we had Roland aged 7, Godfrey aged 4, Ralph aged 1 year and 7 months, and at the top Horace Richard aged 9 years. One can only assume it was something like cholera, one of those terrible diseases that we don't suffer from any longer, but wrought havoc just over 150 years ago. I'm at the top of a path that leads down through the woods, and yet amongst all the undergrowth and brambles and weeds and ivy on my left, and a number of other stones, all well preserved, but quite impossible to reach and read at this time. Mary, wife of Joshua Poole, an evangelist, for whom she lived and laboured, and she died aged just 42. I'm going to call it a day there. I haven't explored even a part of this cemetery. It is large and it is absolutely fascinating. There are some wonderful memorials here, examples of the stonemason's work. I certainly put this cemetery in my top tier, the top division of best cemeteries in the UK, and do encourage you to come. They do organised tours, I believe. I do encourage you to come and just explore it. It is a really good cemetery to visit. Till the next time.